you really need to take that strategic approach and not just put in AI. Instead, look at what problems, what your business objectives are, determine how AI can solve that, and then follow a very strategic approach to the safe and secure adoption of AI to solve those problems. Otherwise, you stand a chance of being left in the dust.
Hello, and welcome to Trust Versus, a podcast powered by HITRUST, the global leader of cybersecurity assurance. My name is Ryan Patrick, Vice President of Adoption at HITRUST.
And I'm Jeremy Huval, Chief Innovation Officer at HITRUST. Today, we're talking to Dr. Donnie Wendt, author of a new cybersecurity book that we were really excited about called the Cybersecurity Trinity. And I wanted to talk to Donnie because this concept of the Cybersecurity Trinity is a bit novel, a bit different spin on some concepts that we're used to hearing security referred to as like CIA, confidentiality, integrity, availability. And there's other acronyms out there, as we know, but this one about focusing on this Trinity, pairing artificial intelligence with automation in the security monitoring space and active cyber defense. It seemed novel enough that on the surface, we thought to ourselves, man, whoever wrote this has got a lot of years of experience. We got to get them on the phone and really double click on this.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Donnie is he was a practitioner for many years, working at MasterCard for over 20 years as a principal security researcher, where he did a lot of research around new innovations and a lot of new threats. And this was kind of at the advent of machine learning and AI generally. So he has been in this game for a really, really long time. Let's dive into it.
So we're talking to you today a bit about your book and also about the problem space of AI security. But before we kind of get into AI security and recognizing it as an industry and sort of how to maybe solve it if it can be solved, as it were, the Cybersecurity Trinity came out pretty recently. What were your goals for writing the book, and who do you think can benefit from the book?
Initially, when that started, it was interesting because I just retired from MasterCard. And I just spoke at this event up in New York where my audience was a bunch of electrical line workers, mostly wanting to know about AI and cybersecurity. So it was very different. I was used to talking to cybersecurity professionals. I was really focused on trying to explain machine learning, AI, and a lot of the underlying concepts to cybersecurity professionals. And then start looking at where is it vulnerable? How can we protect AI? But what I had also seen through years in implementing security tools is that a lot of organizations is really looking at AI and security automation and active defenses. They had pieces of this throughout, but never taken a holistic approach. So I wanted to bring that all together, these three leading technologies out there, bring them together in a framework. And at the end, I align it with the NIST framework to show how we can leverage AI to speed and improve our detection and response, along with automation, and then active cyber defense to slow down the attacker.
You talk about different phases of the ML lifecycle. Training versus testing versus inference phase, which is important to see, like, what do we have to do where? And in it, you talk about the story of Uncle Ronnie. Tell us about the story of Uncle Ronnie and how that applies here.
Oh, yes. My brother's becoming infamous in cybersecurity these days. It's an analogy I refer to as the Uncle Ronnie syndrome. So my brother's name is Ronnie. And when my son was young and we take him over to visit my brother, I'd always talk to him first and say, please do not learn anything from your Uncle Ronnie. Because I knew my brother would teach my son something he shouldn't, right? And then we'd get home and I'd have to quiz my son. It's like, okay, try to figure out what in the world did Uncle Ronnie teach him this time and try to unteach him, right? Now, the advantage I had there was I knew Uncle Ronnie would try to teach him something wrong, and I knew when it was going to occur. So I could try to take some mitigations beforehand, talk to my son, and then a little bit of maybe retraining and mitigations after. The problem we have with machine learning in an adversarial environment like cybersecurity is, I don't know if you noticed, but this world is full of Uncle Ronnies out there, right? That are trying to teach our models wrong behavior. And we don't know whether these Uncle Ronnies are already in our systems or not, right? Which makes it a lot harder to put up defenses, to mitigate these. And that's why we have to follow some very sound practices throughout our machine learning life cycle to avoid attacks such as that. So the Uncle Ronnie is an analogy to a data poisoning attack that would typically occur in our training phase.
I love it. It's interesting. And it's one of those unique cybersecurity threats that sort of cybersecurity professionals wouldn't necessarily think about as sort of germane to this machine learning training phase. And also data scientists themselves may not think about. In the book, you talk about machine learning focusing on uncovering knowledge and discovering relationships in data. In traditional ML, doesn't assume bad guys in the mix. It assumes a non-adversarial environment. And for like researching new applications of AI and new algorithms in the machine learning space, it works. It's great. Like there's a lot of advancement. But when you take an AI system or a ML lifecycle and put it in an adversarial environment like the internet or an assumed hacked network, that raises serious concerns.
First of all, there's a few things, and I always like to start at the beginning, which is around the data. A lot of times people are using open source data. They're using data from different sources out there. So it's around that data provenance. Do I know and trust where this data came from? And then we move into data sanitization. We have to do sanity checks on that data, which is a lot of times includes a lot of statistical analysis, looking for outliers, missing data, things like that. I would say that upfront work, when I'm developing a new, say, machine learning application, 70-80% of the effort is all around preparing the data, getting the data, making sure it's trustworthy, making sure it's the right data to solve the problem. Then once I've got it, we still have to have our cybersecurity, our cybersecurity fundamentals. So around that data and the model throughout the life cycle, we have to have robust access control, version control, and that.
The traditional IT security controls, logging, etc.
Yeah.
And I guess that's on top of the novel stuff that isn't in the typical IT general control toolbox, right?
Right.
And what we're talking about now is very important to machine learning and training new models and tuning models, as it were. Is this concern over AI security just for those building their own models? How does this port over to companies who are using someone else's model, say over an API through something like an AI as a service? Like, how should I think about security if I'm that kind of organization?
Right. And unfortunately, that's really where most organizations are at. Most of them aren't developing their own AI models, right? So third-party security is vital when we start talking about these AI models. Because we're typically not developing our own. We're using those developed by others. So we have to have very sound third-party security vetting and that on them, as well as ensuring that our vendors that are supplying these products are following things like adversarial development, right? Where as we're developing the model, we're actively trying to exploit it and understand how it responds.
Yeah, absolutely. So to play that back to you, just because the data isn't being collected and sanitized and the model isn't being trained and the algorithms selected under my roof, that doesn't mean those controls don't have to happen. doesn't mean the data nobody has to sanitize the data. Nobody has to worry about data poisoning. Basically, you're transferring that control performance to another organization, but it doesn't mean the controls don't have to happen.
The one that you really, and this was very prevalent about 5 years ago, and I still hear it today. And it's the one that really got me, I guess, following deeper into this ML security. It was when I had security vendors coming to me saying that they would implement their AI tool in my production network, and it would listen and learn what's normal and then start protecting. The problem is I don't know anybody out there that's 100% sure that what's normal is actually valid. Uncle Ronnie may already be in your environment, right? So this idea, when we start talking about doing that massive online training with production data, with no sanitization, you don't know what's going in and what it's learning from.
I'm pretty sure that's how Skynet became self-aware and the Terminator was born.
Right. Yes.
Donnie, you hit on something that I'm actually really passionate about, and I know we're going to talk about it further on in the conversation around this AI risk management, especially with your third parties and your vendors being critical, right? Because not everybody is an AI developer, but the overwhelming majority of organizations and individuals out there are AI consumers, which, to your point, you need to push the due diligence up front if you're an organization that wants to consume AI. What I have found that a lot of organizations are putting things in their contracts that will say something like, you can't use our information to train the model. And they feel like their bases are covered. And I know, and I'm curious what your thoughts are, like there's a lot more that needs to go into doing this due diligence, but it seems like there's a knowledge gap.
When you're doing third-party vetting of an AI solution, it's not the same as what you would do for a standard security third-party assessment. And just like with the one similarity is that just like with your other third-party assessments, this isn't a one-time thing. You've got to continually, and I would say it's even more important in the area we're talking about now with AI, because teams' products are continually implementing new capabilities in those products without you knowing. But just saying, oh, it won't train on my data, well, that's a good first step if you're talking about one of the public-facing models. Now, I would say when you're, a lot of times what you're really looking for, and we get into, people ask me, well, what's the best AI model? It depends on what you're trying to solve. But when I'm implementing a solution for a particular company, normally the best solution is more like a small language model that is trained specifically on their data and their data only to give much more valid responses. So that blanket statement of it not being used to train the models, that is valid if it's one of these publicly accessible models. But a lot of times organizations are implementing very specific solutions that are trained on their data.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's one thing to even acknowledge you've got to ask questions around AI on the part of the vendor. Knowing the right questions to ask is also a challenge. And then if the vendor relationship is critical enough or the data is sensitive enough, moving from an AI-centric questionnaire to a stronger bit of AI assurance, like don't just answer my questions. There's going to be a third-party assessor that goes out and inspects evidence to prove it, sort of steps up the strength of assurance, right? And it's our perspective that there are important enough, critical enough, risky enough vendors out there that a questionnaire doesn't suffice, right? You've got to go out and prove it. An AI assurance has to be delivered, right?
Right. It's the same thing we saw a lot with traditional third-party supply chain for software. People started out with just these questionnaires that were going out. Well, that's great. That's a first step. But then we started seeing a lot of very serious third-party attacks coming through that software, and companies realized they needed to up that game, take it further than those questionnaires, like you're saying, and start, especially if this is high-risk data, a high-risk system, start having third-party audits, having proof of these that these practices are being followed. Because I see us going through, and that's one thing I look at. I see I start out as a software developer, and I see us going through some of the same or very similar problems that we went through with software, and it was very painful and took a long time for the industry to understand and incorporate things like penetration testing, even and
risk assessments,
DevSecOps, all of this. When I first started developing, we didn't do any of that, and it was through a lot of very hard lessons that was over many years that became common. Seeing similar in the AI ML realm, the difference being, I think we're moving at a much faster pace in implementing these lessons, but we're still taking a lot of the same hard lessons we should already know. Doing stuff like adversarial testing is different than penetration testing or red teaming, mostly because it's going to focus a lot more on the data instead of the application, but it's the same concepts.
Yeah.
Right? It's the same concepts we've had. We just need to apply them in an AI ML world.
I gave a talk not too long ago on that exact topic of we learned the hard way for years,
Right.
if not decades or more.
Yes.
From a software development perspective, that you need to bake security in at the design phase up front. And right now we're not learning that lesson very well. I mean,
Right.
I say that as a general statement. There are some models that are thinking about security from within the design phase, but we really need to think about what we've learned across the board from a security perspective historically, and overlay that into what we're trying to do from an AI perspective. Like, I think it would lessen the pain a heck of a lot more if we stop trying to build things in a vacuum and actually take a step back and say, hey, security is important because of X, Y, or Z. We've been talking about it for 25, 30 years.
Right.
Let's actually do it right this time, because, and I don't remember who said it to me, someone said last year that the next evolution of AI isn't next year, it's next month.
Right.
And because we're going to move super fast, we need to be making sure that these principles and practices are in place to make the process that much more efficient.
Right. The speed of change is overwhelming to a lot of organizations right now too, and that's a tough hurdle for many of those organizations. Looking at where do I even start, because it just seems to be changing constantly. But yes, having those sound practices, fundamentals in place at the beginning is important. I just think of all the hard lessons I learned around application development. I really don't want to repeat all of those.
Are companies yet internalizing this reality that if you use AI and if you bake AI into your software, you have to do different things, like your current control environment has to be expanded to address different things? Are people internalizing that yet?
I think for the vast majority, I'd say a lot of them are unaware, right, of even what the issues are. A lot of times even unaware that AI or machine learning is so embedded in most of the applications they're leveraging.
Absolutely. And for a long time.
They don't even see the problem, right? And you're right. To a lot of people, AI is this thing that happened around 2020, right? Or 2022, I guess it was. No, we've had AI in our tool sets, a subset of AI called machine learning in our tool sets for years. But to the general public, and even to a lot of the companies out there, this was something that just kind of happen near the end of 2022.
Right. The democratization of AI, as it were. I think about sort of the mainframes where it used to be computers, these big computers in the basement, specialized people used them all the time, and they were making the world go round. But to the regular user, computers weren't really around. But there were some really dedicated, sharp computer scientists in basements with big floppy cards. And then all of a sudden,
I date myself. I was one of those.
But now we all have computers on our desks and in our pockets, and they're everywhere. I kind of think that's what happened to AI a bit, right? It was data science realm, and now it's in the end user realm, right? And we're all thinking it just happened. Yeah. So, okay, in addition to AI, you've actually got a lot of attention to SOAR. I don't want to spend too much time on SOAR because it's not really the focus of the conversation I wanted to have, but it is a critical piece of the Trinity. So briefly, what is SOAR and what are some of the problems that SOAR products try to solve?
Right. So it's the security orchestration, automation, response. But the concept is using automation. So automation to speed our detection capabilities as well as our response. And also then the orchestration part of it is ensuring that we can say when we have a response, which may need updates to multiple different types, firewalls, intrusion detection systems, EDRs, that we orchestrate that response throughout our environment, right? When I look at the Trinity, we have AI as the foundation, right? Because that's basically laying the foundation for everything. It's embedded in all of our tools. And then we use security orchestration and automation to speed our detection and response. And then active cyber defense to slow the attacker. So it's a way of trying to close that gap between the time to compromise and the time to respond. What it's about is allowing us to actually process more, think of it as more incidents, more alerts. We're actually, because right now, before we had implemented security automation, many of these incidents were going undetected because we just didn't have the bandwidth to deal with them. So it's about increasing our visibility and our throughput, not about cutting costs. Because in the end, what you'll see, and now we've seen that come to fruition, where we actually have some of these mature organizations that have fully implemented SOAR, and you see their analysts are focused on things like threat hunting, or they're focused on those incidents that really require human intervention. And all that noise is being handled, the repeatable sort of incidents are all being handled by automation.
So we talked about SOAR, we talked about AI. The last piece of the Trinity is all the different techniques that a company can do for active cyber defense. And in there, you talk about some of our controls are active cyber defense, and some of them walk a gray line of should we be doing this or not? And then some are very clearly, you should not do this, like hack back and take down command and control servers. Don't try to fight the botnet, etc. And you talk a lot about deception as a tool that defenders can use, how attackers use deception all the time, lying and phishing emails. I haven't seen a security book spend so much time on deception, and I thought it was interesting. Can you briefly talk about sort of the role that deception can play in a cybersecurity program's defense toolbox?
Oh, yes. And we can leverage it quite a few different ways, right? And what I saw when I first started talking about deception to cybersecurity professionals, they immediately jumped to this whole very intricate honey net that's sitting out there, that's externally facing, that's going to entice these bad guys to come in. And when I talk about it, a lot of times I'd use the analogy of vampires. It's like, I really don't want to invite the vampire in.
That's like the number one rule of vampires. Don't invite them in.
Right. Don't invite them in, right? I better be really sure of how good I am with a wooden stake if I want to do that, right? And that's typically for most organizations. Now, yes, you have like cybersecurity companies and research and that actively do that. But for most organizations, no. What we're doing is putting stuff internal that will help us. Think of it all the way from the concept of the canary in a coal mine, where we may have deceptive assets out there that any interaction with them immediately triggers an incident and an alert because we know it should never be accessed.
Like an API that no one should call. And if all of a sudden someone calls this API endpoint, somebody's doing something wrong. And it could be a bad guy, could be a malicious insider, right? It could be an accident, but it's an incident.
And it could be records in a database. It could be profiles. It could be anything out there, right? Any sort of asset. But then we can take it a step further. So that's kind of the first level. But then we can actually then start creating deceptive assets that are designed for, if the attacker stumbles across them, to slow them down and allow us to also observe their activity if that's what we're doing. Some organizations take the standpoint of once they're detected, we want them out. Others may be a little more research focused and actually want to watch what the attacker's doing. But the real key is that we really set this up as part of our overall strategy, not just do deception for deception's sake.
So it feeds into your SIEM, it feeds into your SOAR.
Right. And it also, our AI is involved in that deception, right? We can create deceptive assets with ease in a cyber realm. It's so easy to create a deceptive asset, but then we have to make sure we maintain them, that they have to continue to look real. And that's where I look at most of the use of deception, from what I've seen from a practical standpoint, is internal. It's also, by the way, a fairly good tool at helping identify insider threats a lot of times.
Curious insiders, malicious insiders. Excellent. Well, yeah, I thought there was an especially important chapter. And again, just sort of a deep treatment that I haven't seen in many other cybersecurity books. So it was pretty cool. Was there anything, we're coming up on time, anything else that we didn't ask that you feel like especially important to Footstomp?
Oh man, I could talk about this topic for hours. I'm serious. There's just so much. If there's people still on the fence, you really need to figure out from a company perspective and a strategy how you can leverage AI strategically to improve your company, whether that's through new markets, reaching new markets, new products, streamlining your processes. But you really need to take that strategic approach and not just put in AI. Instead, look at what problems, what your business objectives are, determine how AI can solve that, and then follow a very strategic approach to the safe and secure adoption of AI to solve those problems.
Well, this is great. And again, thank you so much for spending time with us.
So, Ryan, that was a good chat. What were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, I thought that Donnie really kind of drew some strong conclusions around the Cybersecurity Trinity. But more importantly for me is just getting him to talk to us about all of his experience with AI generally. Because if you think about where we're at with AI today, there's still a huge amount of people who just don't understand it and probably are intimidated by it, and they don't know where to start. And Donnie had some really practical advice on, just embrace it, get started on working, and don't really overthink it. So that was one of the biggest takeaways for me.
Yeah, me too. And it's a book about a trinity of automation, active cyber defense, like honeypots and the like, and AI. But I thought the AI section really shined. He's got a lot of experience teaching non-technical people about general machine learning concepts and explaining what AI is, and then following up that general explanation with, and here's why it can be a security concern. So like that practical plain English, plain language approach to saying, here's some security stuff you have to worry about in the AI space, it squarely hit the nail on the head for me. And it ties in really nicely to the High Trust AI cybersecurity certification. The more awareness that, everyday business people have about the novelties and the specificities of cybersecurity threats around the AI tools they use, the more cautiously they can approach them, and the more intelligently their security teams can evaluate those tools. So really, it's one of those things where like a rising tide rises all boats. The more messaging around the AI security nuances and the fact that it truly is its own problem space that we have to acknowledge and react to helps everybody's tooling be more secure and everyone's TPRM programs be a little bit better in thinking about the novelties here. So from that perspective, AI, I really thought this was a good contribution to the field. And again, a lovely chat with Donnie. We're really appreciative for him and his time. And hopefully you as the listeners got a fair amount out of this.
If you like the show, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Thanks for listening.